There is a number that keeps showing up in conversations happening right now inside the boardrooms of America's biggest RV companies. That number is $55,000. And the reason it keeps coming up is not because anyone is celebrating. It is because that number represents something that was not supposed to be possible. A fully equipped, off-road capable, technologically advanced motorhome with four-wheel drive, a full bathroom, a real kitchen, solar panels on the roof, and a smart system you run entirely from your phone. $55,000. The same vehicle from an American brand, if you could even find one with those specs, would cost you somewhere between $120,000 and $250,000. And the executives sitting in those boardrooms know exactly what that price gap means, even if they are not ready to say it out loud yet. Because here is the thing about 50-year-old industries that have never been seriously challenged. They get comfortable. They stop asking hard questions. They start believing that the prices they charge are justified simply because they have always charged them. And then one day, someone from somewhere unexpected walks in with a blank sheet of paper, better technology, lower costs, and absolutely no reason to play by the old rules. That is exactly what just happened to the American RV industry. And the story of how it happened, why it happened, and what comes next is one of the most important industrial disruption stories of our time. Hit that subscribe button if you find this interesting. Let us start at the very beginning, because you need to understand what the RV industry actually looked like before any of this started. For the better part of 5 decades, buying a motorhome in America was a very specific kind of experience. You walked into a dealership, you looked at a lineup of large, boxy vehicles with diesel engines bolted in the front, plywood cabinet interiors that swelled and buckled in rain, fold-out beds that creaked, and appliances that felt like they belonged in a motel from 2009. The prices were eye-watering. The average American motorhome today costs around $150,000. A premium model can reach $300,000. Some luxury builds push well past that, and the moment you drive any of them off the dealer lot, you lose somewhere between 20 and 25% of the value before you even stop for your first tank of fuel. RV owners have a nickname for their vehicles that they say with a laugh that is only partially a joke. They call them rolling money pits, and the horror stories are not rare exceptions. Water leaks after 3 trips, wall panels that bubble and separate within the first year, electrical systems that malfunction when the temperature drops, air conditioning units that give out during the first real summer. These are not the experiences of unlucky buyers. These are Tuesday. These are the standard, widely shared, deeply expected frustrations of owning a traditionally built American motorhome. Now here is what makes this even more frustrating, and what makes what happened next so significant. The companies building these vehicles were not under any meaningful pressure to do better. A small group of manufacturers, names like Thor Industries, Winnebago, and Forest River, controlled the overwhelming majority of the market. There was no serious competition pushing prices down. There was no outside force demanding better engineering. Buyers kept signing enormous finance agreements because the dream of the open road is a powerful thing, and there simply was no better option sitting in front of them. For 50 years, that arrangement held without anyone seriously threatening it. That comfortable little world just got a very loud wake-up call, and it came from a direction that almost nobody in the industry was watching. In 2019, China's total motorhome fleet sat at around 213,000 vehicles across the entire country. That sounds significant until you realize the United States sells roughly 500,000 RVs every single year. China's market was young, scattered, and still figuring out where campgrounds should even go. Most Chinese motorhomes at the time were considered basic, rough interiors, questionable build quality, nothing that any serious RV industry analyst in Indiana thought worth paying close attention to. That was the mistake. While Western manufacturers were relaxed, Chinese engineers were doing something considerably more interesting. They were studying the RV industry the way a chess grandmaster studies an opponent before a critical match, looking for every weakness, every gap, every place where the industry had quietly gone lazy and kept collecting profit from buyers who had no alternative. And they found 3 structural advantages sitting right in front of them, advantages that no American RV company possessed. The first advantage was battery technology. China was not simply participating in the global electric vehicle revolution. China was leading it. Companies like BYD had spent years building some of the most advanced, most energy-dense, most cost-efficient battery packs on the planet. BYD's Blade battery technology, the same system powering their best-selling electric cars and dominating commercial truck electrification, could be adapted to power a motorhome for days without ever plugging into shore power. No Western RV manufacturer had anything remotely equivalent equivalent waiting in their back pocket. Not even close. The second advantage was manufacturing scale and vertical integration. China's industrial system is engineered for speed and volume in a way that Western factories genuinely cannot match without decades of restructuring. But more important than the scale was the control. When a Chinese manufacturer decides to build something and controls its own supply chain from chassis to components to power systems, the cost savings are not marginal. They are structural. They completely change the math of what a vehicle can cost to produce and what it needs to sell for. The third advantage was the most powerful of all, and it is the one that Western companies consistently underestimated. Chinese manufacturers had no old habits to protect. American RV companies had spent 50 years building relationships with component suppliers, dealer networks, and engineering teams who all had a stake in keeping the product exactly as it was. Changing the way an American motorhome was built meant upsetting dozens of relationships, renegotiating contracts, and admitting that decades of decisions had been suboptimal. Chinese engineers walked into this industry with a completely blank page, and a blank page in the hands of someone who is hungry and technically capable is one of the most dangerous things in any market. What happened next did not take long to arrive, and when it did arrive, it arrived in a way that no one in the industry was fully prepared for. In late 2024, a vehicle called the Wanaka BYD-T5DM motorhome was unveiled. The moment video footage of this vehicle hit RV forums and social media, the reaction was immediate. Discussion threads that normally moved slowly for days were exploding within hours, because the specifications were simply not supposed to be possible at the price being quoted. Here is what this vehicle actually offers. It runs on BYD's own hybrid diesel-electric system, built around a 70 kilowatt-hour blade battery pack, the same proven technology used in BYD's passenger vehicle lineup, not a modified afterthought. The combined range stretches past 800 kilometers. The freshwater tank holds 400 liters. On board, there is a full bathroom, a real kitchen capable of actual cooking, rather than the token setup in a traditional motorhome, dual-zone climate control, a 10-kilowatt inverter powerful enough to run all your appliances simultaneously without compromising your battery reserve, and a smart system that controls every major function of the vehicle directly from your phone. The interior does not look like a camping vehicle. It looks like a boutique hotel room that someone decided to make mobile, and the starting price in China is around $60,000. Western reviewers who flew out to actually spend time with these vehicles came back saying the same things. The build quality was real. Panels fit the way they were supposed to fit. Materials felt premium and held up to actual use. Systems worked as advertised. This was not a concept model shown under favorable lighting at an auto show. This was the finished, production-ready product. And the shock was not simply the price. The shock was that no American or European brand had attempted to build anything like this at any price point. The technology existed. The consumer demand existed. The engineering capability existed. Nobody in the Western RV world had connected the dots. Then came the vehicle that hit the adventure community even harder. The Great Wall Power off-road motorhome. Built on a legitimate truck platform with a powerful diesel engine, permanent four-wheel drive, lifted expedition-grade suspension, and a steel winch mounted on the front for real vehicle recovery situations. Inside, a full bathroom, a real kitchen, sleeping space for a family, and smart technology integrated throughout. This was a motorhome that could go places a traditional American motorhome would never survive. The kind of terrain that normally requires a purpose-built, specialist-converted expedition vehicle costing upwards of $250,000. Price in China, around $55,000. A comparable American motorhome with off-road specifications, if you can find one, starts at $120,000 and often climbs well past $180,000. Videos of this vehicle climbing boulder-strewn mountain trails spread across every outdoor and adventure platform imaginable, and the comment sections told a very consistent story. People were not just impressed, they were doing the math, and the math was not adding up the way anyone in the American RV industry needed it to. But to understand how China arrived at that price point, you need to understand something that the industry had never been forced to confront honestly before: the true structure of what you are actually paying for when you buy a traditional American motorhome. Here is how the process actually works. An American motorhome manufacturer begins by purchasing a commercial van or truck chassis from Ford, Mercedes, or another major automaker. That chassis purchase already includes that automaker's profit margin. Then the manufacturer goes shopping for everything else separately. Cabinets from one supplier, electrical systems from another, plumbing components from a third company, appliances from a fourth, upholstery and soft goods from a fifth. Every single one of those suppliers charges a markup on their components before they ship them to the assembly plant. By the time all those components arrive and the vehicle begins to take shape, 5 or 6 or 7 separate companies have already extracted their slice of profit from what will eventually be the final retail price. The motorhome then travels to a dealership, where the dealer adds their own margin on top of everything that came before. What the buyer eventually signs for is not just the cost of building the vehicle. It is the accumulated weight of an entire chain of businesses, each one extracting value from the transaction. A detailed breakdown of a Chinese hybrid motorhome production cost found that actual manufacturing costs ran between $35,000 and $40,000. With reasonable profit margins built in, the retail price landed around $55,000. A comparable American motorhome carried actual production costs of $60,000 to $70,000, but sold at retail for $140,000 after dealer margins, brand premiums, and supply chain fees were stacked on top of each other. Roughly the same real-world quality, nearly 3 times the price. That is not an inefficiency at the margins. That is 50 years of unchallenged pricing finally being exposed by someone who had absolutely no reason to participate in the system. And once buyers started seeing those numbers laid out side by side, the conversation shifted in a way that is very difficult to walk back. But the price story alone, as significant as it is, would not have been enough to cause the level of disruption that is now unfolding. Because while Chinese manufacturers were restructuring the cost equation, they were simultaneously doing something else, something that the Western RV world had never seriously attempted. They were making the motorhome genuinely intelligent, not smart in the superficial sense, not a touchscreen panel glued to a refrigerator door as a marketing feature. Smart in the way that fundamentally changes how the entire vehicle thinks, responds, and manages itself. The DTEL Smart Motorhome series became one of the most discussed examples of what this actually looks like in practice. Every light in the vehicle responds to voice commands without requiring a separate hub device or a subscription. Temperature and ventilation adjust automatically based on the weather conditions outside and the number of occupants inside. The battery management system uses artificial intelligence to track individual usage patterns and continuously optimizes power allocation to extend off-grid capability, in some tested configurations by up to 40% compared to traditional battery management approaches. Some models integrate facial recognition at the entry door, so you never fumble for keys or remember access codes after a long day of hiking through terrain. The entire system learns your routines and adjusts proactively rather than waiting for manual input. One reviewer who spent a week traveling in one of these vehicles described the experience in terms that would have seemed like exaggeration 3 years ago. It felt nothing like traditional camping, they wrote. It felt more like staying in a fully functional smart apartment that happened to be parked next to a river. American manufacturers, during this same period, were still publishing opinion pieces in trade publications, debating whether electric motorhomes were conceptually ready for mainstream adoption. Chinese manufacturers had already moved past that conversation entirely and were measuring percentage growth in new energy motorhome registrations. The off-road dimension of this story is equally striking. Footage began circulating across adventure travel platforms and outdoor enthusiast communities showing Chinese off-road motorhomes navigating terrain that traditional American RVs would never be taken near. Rocky switchback trails, steep mountain ascents, river crossings. One piece of footage that spread particularly widely showed a $65,000 Chinese off-road motorhome moving steadily and confidently up a steep mountain track, while a $200,000 American luxury motorhome sat stuck in a patch of soft dirt nearby. The comment section underneath that video had essentially one question, repeated over and over in different forms. How is this possible? The answer was not complicated. It was engineering that had started from zero, asked better questions, and had access to better technology from the beginning. The scale of what is now happening in China's domestic motorhome market is difficult to fully process if you are accustomed to thinking of China as an emerging market rather than a leading one. China's motorhome market was valued at over $4 billion in 2024 and is projected to more than double to over $10 billion by 2033. Campervan sales grew more than 55% in a single year. New energy motorhome registrations, meaning electric and hybrid configurations, have been growing at rates that Western analysts initially assumed were reporting errors. The government has committed to establishing 4,000 campgrounds across the country by 2025, building the infrastructure that turns a vehicle purchase into a lifestyle. A startup focused on smart travel trailer technology raised the equivalent of $11 million in a single funding round. Wuling, a brand better known internationally for affordable small cars, unveiled a motorhome priced at the equivalent of $15,800, targeting a mass market that American manufacturers have never conceptually considered serving. And critically, the customer driving this growth is not who the American RV industry has spent 50 years designing products for. It is not the wealthy retiree with a fully paid mortgage and decades of savings. It is young families, weekend adventurers, or first-time travelers in their 30s who want affordable, technology-forward access to the kind of freedom that RV travel can provide. This philosophical difference between the motorhome as a luxury retirement product and the motorhome as an accessible vehicle for everyone explains more about the current disruption than any single specification or price point. When you build for a different customer, you build a different product. And a different product at a different price point changes everything about who enters the market. Chinese manufacturers are not building one flagship model and calling it a lineup. They have taken an approach that mirrors the structure of the mainstream automotive industry. Entry-level vehicles for first-time buyers, mid-range family motorhomes with solid specifications and practical technology, or premium hybrid builds for buyers who want the full technology experience, and full luxury configurations for the top of the market, a complete range at every price point. This is the model that created the modern automobile market, and it is the model that is now reshaping what the global motorhome industry will look like within a decade. The first wave of international expansion is already underway. Maxus, a Chinese electric camper van brand, announced European market entry in 2025 with vehicles priced between $40,000 and $50,000. Their primary competition in that market segment is the Volkswagen California, a product that Europeans have loved for years and that carries a price tag of over $90,000. European dealerships that had ignored Chinese vehicle manufacturers for years were suddenly reaching out to request distribution rights. The reaction was not uniform enthusiasm. There were concerns about after-sales support, parts availability, and long-term brand trust. But the inquiries were real and they were increasing. Global motorhome shows that had historically filled their floor space exclusively with German, American, and Italian brands began allocating significant space to Chinese manufacturers. Buyers walked the floors, sat inside the vehicles, ran their hands across the materials, and started asking their dealers very uncomfortable questions about why the price difference was so large. Meanwhile, Chinese manufacturers continued expanding their footprint beyond Europe. New Jiao RV, a Chinese manufacturer with Hong Kong Stock Exchange listing, reported nearly 90% growth in orders from Australia and New Zealand in just the first quarter of 2026 compared to the same period the previous year. The company was expanding its dealer network and increasing production capacity simultaneously. This is not the pattern of a niche player finding a small corner of the market. This is the pattern of a category being entered seriously and scaled systematically. The American market has more protection than most for now, and that protection is real. Tariffs on Chinese vehicle imports are substantial. As of early 2025, the Trump administration had escalated tariffs on Chinese goods significantly, with Chinese vehicles facing layered import taxes that make direct price competition difficult in the near term. Building a service and parts network across a country the size of the United States takes years, not months. Safety certification processes for the American market are lengthy and demanding. These are genuine barriers, and they genuinely matter. But barriers slow things down. They do not stop them permanently. And history is remarkably consistent on this point. Every time a combination of quality and price disruption has been held at the border by tariffs and regulations, the disruption eventually arrived anyway. The question was always when, not whether. What is already changing, without waiting for any import barriers to fall, is the conversation inside Western boardrooms. Engineers and product managers at American RV companies have been visiting Chinese factories, walking production floors, examining components, and coming home with reports that are, by multiple accounts, deeply uncomfortable. The gap in technology integration and cost efficiency is real, and it is structural. It is not something that can be closed by a press release about a new model or a small investment in a solar panel option package. Closing a gap this size requires rethinking fundamental assumptions about how motorhomes are designed, where components come from, who the customer actually is, and what they are genuinely willing to pay for. Some American manufacturers are beginning to respond. Winnebago has been integrating lithium battery systems and smart home features as standard rather than optional. Harbinger Motors has been developing swappable battery module systems. There are genuine innovation efforts underway. But the honest assessment of industry analysts tracking both sides of this story is that the pace of response in the West has been slow relative to the pace of the challenge arriving from the East. Motorized RV sales in the United States fell roughly 10.5% year-over-year in recent tracked periods. New RV sales overall declined nearly 5%. Meanwhile, Chinese motorhome manufacturers were reporting export growth, domestic market expansion, and investment inflows simultaneously. There is a concept in technology analysis called leapfrogging. It describes what happens when a market that was previously behind skips over the intermediate development stages and arrives directly at the most advanced current state of a technology. It happened with mobile banking in parts of Africa that never built traditional banking infrastructure. It happened with renewable energy in countries that never built out coal grids. It is now happening with motorhomes in a way that the Western RV industry did not model as a serious risk until the videos were already going viral. China did not enter the motorhome business by building a slightly cheaper version of what already existed. They entered by asking what a motorhome should actually be if you started designing one today. With today's battery technology, today's smart systems, today's manufacturing capabilities, and no obligation to protect any of the decisions made in the previous 50 years. The answer to that question turned out to be a vehicle that costs $55,000, climbs mountain trails under its own power, runs its systems through artificial intelligence, and looks like somewhere you would actually want to spend a week rather than somewhere you are enduring in exchange for the scenery outside. The global motorhome market sits at roughly $38 to $40 billion and is projected to grow steadily through the coming decade. The Asia-Pacific region is now the fastest-growing segment of that global market, expanding at nearly 9% annually, while North America and Europe face declining new sales even as interest in the lifestyle continues to rise. The paradox is real, and it is telling. More people than ever want to live and travel in motorhomes. Fewer people than ever are buying new ones from traditional manufacturers. Something is filling the space between those two facts. And increasingly, that something is coming out of Chinese factories. For anyone who has ever looked at the price tag on an American motorhome and felt the dream of the open road quietly recede because the numbers simply did not work, that equation is changing, not in the theoretical future. Right now, the vehicles exist, the technology works. The prices have been confirmed by independent reviewers who flew to China specifically to check whether any of it was real. It was real. It is real. And the distribution networks to make these vehicles accessible in more markets are being built as you read this. The motorhome that your parents could only dream about affording might actually be within reach for your generation. The choice between a basic, aging trailer and a $200,000 luxury rig is no longer the only choice available. The range in the middle, the range that serves people who want real quality and real technology without needing to take out a second mortgage, is now being filled by manufacturers who started from zero and asked better questions. The RV industry spent half a century selling essentially the same product at a higher price every year, comfortable in the belief that no one would ever show up with something better and cheaper at the same time. That comfort was always a bet. The bet just lost. And the road ahead for buyers and manufacturers alike just got considerably more interesting than anyone in Elkhart, Indiana was planning for. The revolution is not coming. It has already started. The question now is simply how quickly the rest of the world catches up to what is already happening in the hills outside Beijing, on the trails of Sichuan, and in the order books of European dealerships that spent years saying they would never stock a Chinese vehicle. The answer, based on everything we are watching right now, is a great deal more quickly than anyone expected. If this changed how you think about the future of travel and what is possible when an industry gets genuinely disrupted, hit the like button and subscribe. We cover the shifts in technology, industry, and everyday life that most people do not hear about until they are already happening everywhere. And drop your honest answer in the comments. If a Chinese motorhome offered you better technology and more features at half the price of an American one, would you actually buy it? because the conversation down there is always worth reading.